Hi everyone, this is Miss Titus, and this video is meant to teach you how to use the themed children's story planner. Now, before we start filling in the blanks on your sheet and talking through each component of this, I want to tell you why we are doing this. So, throughout the first quarter, we have been studying a lot of fiction. We read a novel that was historical fiction, and we've learned lots of things like conflict and plot and theme, and we've been applying that knowledge to fictional stories, some of which are realistic fiction as well. And so now we want to continue applying our learning, but instead of reading and using these concepts, we now want to do some writing. So ultimately, what you're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is writing your own children's story. And you'll be required to use the planner that looks like the piece of paper you have in front of you and what's also currently on the screen for this video. So the purpose of today's lesson is not so much focusing on the story spoon that you've just read or listened to, but to use that story to help us learn how to use this planner, because there are a lot of boxes, there's a lot of information that we need to fill out. And eventually you'll be filling these things in with your own ideas for a completely original story that you make up. But in order to do that, we have to know how to use this graphic organizer, and we have to know the value of each of these pieces of information on this story planner. So that's the purpose of this video, is to kind of pay attention to what these boxes are and use the story of Spoon as an example so that when you're filling out your own, you'll know what kind of information needs to go in each box. Okay? So to start, we've got the story title here, and of course, make sure you put your name on this so that way if you lose it, we can get it back to you in your class period. And so now that we've read the story, we're going to kind of think through what age range do we think this story would be for? And I think this is completely opinion-based for me personally. I think 5 to 7 years old seems appropriate to me. So I'm going to highlight that. You may want to circle it on your paper. Since I'm doing mine on the computer, I'm going to just use the highlighter tool. And then as I go, you'll notice all these black boxes. So anytime I unhighlight a black box, you should be writing that word in the blank on your paper. So this first box is audience. And so when you're planning your own story, you're going to decide, okay, which age range do you want your story to be for? And this particular story in our example, I'm saying is 5 to 7 years old, just because it's a fairly simple story, but it does deal with a character who is feeling bad about himself. And I feel like that would be a little bit too intense for maybe a 2 to 4 year old, but it seems like something a 5 to 7 year old could handle. So you'll think through, in the story that you get to make up and in a couple of weeks, what age are you targeting? And then before we even write the story, we want to think about what is the conflict. So what's the main problem that's really going to drive the story? And so in this story for Spoon, the issue is that he's feeling bad about himself. So on your paper, you're going to write the word self. And this is an internal conflict because it's inside of Spoon's mind. And so we don't just want to identify the type, right? So that's important, but we also want to explain, okay, so what is the problem? And so not only is Spoon feeling bad about himself, it's not because of something that happened, it's specifically because he's comparing himself to his friends, and he feels like everybody else is better than he is. So these words that I'm unhighlighting and then underlining for you, that's what you're writing on your paper. So next time you look at one of these planners, when you're thinking through your own story, you'll choose your audience and then kind of figure out what's going to be the main problem that your character or characters are facing and which type. So then once we know what that conflict is, we have to kind of think through, when is that problem going to start, or what's going to cause it to start, our initiating event, and then what's going to cause it to change, or the climax. When is it going to turn around for our characters? And because this is a children's story, you probably want to think through, how can your story have a happy ending, just because we typically like for children to feel warm and happy, and who doesn't like to have a happy ending? So in the Spoon story, in this box here, when does the conflict start, or what's the initiating event? The conflict begins when Spoon's mom, so his mom, asks him why he is so blue or sad, and then he tells her why. He starts explaining all the things he's feeling about his friends. And then in this box, when does the conflict change, or the climax? This is much later in the story. So the majority of the story, that rising action, is happening where he's explaining all of his feelings about his friends. And then the conflict changes when Spoon's mom, okay, of course, our protagonist, Spoon's mom tells him about all the great things that make him special. So if the problem is individual versus self, we've thought this through. It starts when he shares his problem with his mom, and then it turns around when she tells him things that are special about him that make him feel better. So because his feelings are changing, that's why this is the climax. So when planning your own story, these are the key details you want to have in place before you just start writing from beginning to end. Because if we don't have these key details in place, these are the most important bits of your story. They could get lost, and then your story could end up having too much exposition, or not enough rising action, all that good stuff, or not a clear problem. And if these things aren't clear in your story, it's probably not going to be a very good story. So that's why we want to focus on these boxes on our planner. So then moving on, then we want to start thinking about our more specific characters. So once we know what they're going to deal with, now we can kind of think through, what are they going to look like? What's their personality going to be like? And so our protagonist obviously is Spoon. And so I'm going to find, actually, this is a good image over here. We're just going to describe what he looks like. So we already have on there small, big head, shiny, and then we're also going to add short to our list. So you'll write short on your paper. And then for personality traits, we have worried, sad, envious, and then we're also going to write doubtful. And the reason that we're choosing doubtful is because he's kind of doubting himself. He's doubting how cool or exciting he might be as a character. So doubtful in himself. And then another important character in this story is Spoon's mom. So if you look at our conflict, the problem starts when she's talking to him, and the problem changes when she tells him positive things about himself. So she's a pretty important character we want to take some time to describe. So you'd want to think about that in your own story as well. So who will be your protagonist? What will they be like? And then who might be another important character? And so I'll go over to our story and let's find a good picture of the mom. Here we go. We can see her right here. So far we have tall, shiny, pink cheeks, and we are going to add, let's see here. We're going to add long eyelashes, because as you can see here, she has eyelashes, but Spoon doesn't. So that's an important detail that the illustrator included here. And then for her personality, we know that she's loving. She's a little concerned about Spoon, understanding of where he's coming from, because all of those times she kind of agrees with him. Yeah, like this friend is doing that thing. But then by the end, she's also really encouraging in that she tells him the things that are special about him, so that he knows that he's important and talented as well, not just his friends. So once you've thought through the problem and your important characters, you'll also want to think through the theme or the message that your characters are supposed to learn. And so the way we first decide on a theme, and this might be the last thing that you do as you're planning, because your story might need to kind of develop before you think this through, is come up with what your theme topic is. So what's kind of the gist? What's it about? And so in this story, this is all about confidence and about a character's ability to have confidence. And then we'd also want to then turn it into a sentence, which is our theme statement. And so this here is be confident in who you are and how you are different and unique from others. So stay tuned for the plot diagram, which will be the second video here.